I want to, okay, so you're my best friend, right?
Yes.
I've said this about 1,000 times, but I haven't, we've only known each other for how long? Like 4 years?
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years, right? And Lauren and I met in college. We met at Brookdale,
Rupp
but
to Dale.
at the Dale, but before she was at Brookdale, she actually was at a university and she decided to transfer. So I just want you to talk about kind of your experience as to why you wanted to transfer. We'll get into more like specifics later, but originally what you planned on doing when you were going to university. So start there.
Yeah, totally. So, in high school, like I took AP Bio as a junior and I fell in love with biology. So, when I was starting my college process, I was really looking at schools that had a really good biology program. So, I could go bio pre-med. And I fell in love with the University of Scranton, and that was the first school I visited. And that's where I ended up going for a whole semester. And there was like a list of like several events and several reasons why I ended up leaving there. But at the end of the day, like I'm a very much a homebody, and it was 3.5 hours almost away from home, and it was just a lot. So that had a big factor into why I decided to leave. But that whole process and why I wanted a university is because I feel like when you're in high school, you're kind of the narrative is like, oh, you have to go to a university. Like that's just what you do. Like you leave home and you do this whole thing. So like that's what I thought my only options were. And like I thought I needed that experience to like develop into like a person in society. But it didn't pan out. I was sick my senior year of high school, and that like I got better obviously, and I was able to go to college, but I was still processing a lot of what had happened, and that just like it didn't mesh well with being away for the first time. Like I was just dealing with way too much, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I gotta do something about this. And the choice was to either transfer to Monmouth or transfer to Brookdale. And I'll be honest, my GPA was not high enough to get into Monmouth. So I went to Brookdale. And I'm so happy that I did because like I got to figure out like what I really wanted to major. Like I think it's so hard to pick a major right out of high school.
It is.
And I love what I'm majoring in now, and I think there's so much opportunity for growth there. So I'm glad with how everything panned out.
Yeah, I feel like it's so crappy because like community college gets such a bad rep.
It so does. And like Brookdale's like one of the top community colleges in the country.
Oh, totally. But like I think that from people that I've met and had classes with and stuff, like one, there's so many opportunities that can happen from going to community college. And I find that I found people when I would go to college who had a that like particular community college, I found that there's a lot of people like me who have the same goals that I did. Because I know for me, like the high school, all the schools that I had growing up, like they didn't have to care about things and care
Right.
about working or caring about getting a good job and stuff. And I feel like with that no care comes no responsibility. So when I got to Brookdale, like I met people like you who like were very driven in, going to school and working and stuff. And that does play into the fact that I think community college gets a bad rep because it it's like the complete opposite of like what the college experience should be.
Oh, totally. And I think people who are in high school think that, oh, community college is like the you failed plan. It's
Yeah.
not the you failed plan. It's completely other plausible alternative that works. And I think when you are at a community college, like you said, you see the people who they're not there because they failed and couldn't get into other schools, so they
Yeah.
needed to do this. They're there because they want to be there to better themselves. I had so many like older students in my class that like are returning to school, so like they've been in the working force for so long.
Hmm.
Like you have such a diverse m- mix of students there. And like you have the people who are like, yeah, like I'm here because I wanted to be able to work and go to
Yeah.
school. Like that's like a reality for a lot of community students and community college students. And I think a lot of people miss that. And they think it's only like, oh, like I'm only here because like I didn't do well in high school. Like that's not true.
No, it's totally not. Like I can tell you, I was so stoked. I'm like, I don't have to take my SATs.
So, I'm mainly gonna stick to like the overt stuff because it's easier to understand and it's
Mhm.
easier to explain. So, when I was around 16, I still haven't had my first period. Oh, sorry, I dropped my chapstick. But so when I was 16, I still haven't had my first period. And so we went to my mom's doctor. And at the time, I was a gymnast. So I was very active. And they're like, oh, it could just because like you don't have any body fat on you or whatever, but let's run some tests. And those tests came back where I was diagnosed with a genetic disorder that put me at high risk for ovarian cancer. So later that summer, I had surgery to remove both my ovaries to, sorry, both my ovaries to make sure I didn't have any cancer. And it was in that process where they found that my right ovary had some cancerous cells in it. So they had to go back in and do what's called the staging operation. So in this process, they just like take a bunch of samples from like your lymph nodes and everything. And I got very fortunate and I only had stage 1. So it was only the cancer cells were only in that one ovary and they hadn't moved. So that means I didn't need chemo, but I had to go get checkups every 6 months. So I would go and get a CAT scan and get blood work. And then it eased up where I'd get a CAT scan every year, but I'd get blood work every 6 months. I'm coming up on 5 years in August of being, cancer free. So, that's really big
Yay!
news. But that whole process, um, ended putting me on hormones for, hormone regulation, and that was a big factor in why I came home from college because at the time, my I was on so many different they were trying to stabilize me because they didn't know what dosages I need. And when you're on hormones and you're not used to them, like you know how like everyone's like, "Oh, like it's just that age, like they're going through puberty, like they're going like they have like their ups and downs
You're a
and they're."
monster.
Yeah. Like imagine going through all of that in the span of like a couple months.
Yeah.
Like it's like a year-long process typically, like doing that
Yeah, and
and
then
I
it's
had
extra heightened.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
it was just that was just a lot, and, like, it affected everyone, like, around me too, and, like, I'm still dealing with it because it changes you a lot, and
Of
you don't
course.
realize how much, like, that impacts you, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring down the mood, but I think it's very
No,
important
no.
for like you to talk about it especially. But like I'm sure that like it's inevitable and everybody can agree that that is something that is already very very sh- I don't even want to say stressful because that doesn't give like the impact of like how that affects somebody, but take the effect of finding that out and then also being a kid.
Yeah, like, you think you have your shit together when you're 16? You
You
don't.
no, you do
Like
not.
like, you're I my favorite fact about the human body is that your brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25,
Yeah.
and, like, I find that so fascinating. It's like certain aspects of you are, like, considered an adult, but you're not really an adult up here in your head until you're 25 and you can, like,
Yeah.
actually rationalize things. So,
Right. And to that point, because it also, people question whether we should make the drinking age to 25
right.
because of the fact that your brain isn't fully developed. Not to change subjects again, but I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know, cause like then people argue, well, like the drinking age used to be 18, and like why can someone go fight for their country but not be able to have a drink? I feel
as if
like
they're the same things, but okay. Like
yeah.
they hold the same weight.
Yeah, I feel like drinking is such a huge thing in our society that like it like you have to drink to have fun. Like I think
Well,
what
it's not
people
even
forget is drinking is alcohol is a depressant. It's not
well,
an
I was
upper.
gonna say it's not even like the drinking because I feel when I think of like drinking as a form of like being social, I think more of like European people were drinking where they drink probably in more moderation than we do in our culture, American culture. It's about getting drunk
Yeah.
and
And
looking
like
like a moron.
and like I don't know if you ever like cried while being drunk, cuz I used to do that. Especially when I was at Scranton, I did that a lot.
I usually just pass out, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. Like, it's like alcohol's such an interesting topic to me because like it's so like glamified and it's not that glamorous. Like, yeah, it's like certain drinks you can make like
It's
taste
kind
good
of
and like
sad.
yeah. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I don't like having like a couple like drinks and being buzzed and like having a good time. I'm not against it at
Of
all.
course not.
But like that's
Did
not
you
what I
ever
can
be on wine night?
Yeah, like, that's fun. It's like I don't know. That's like
It's usually the people who are going to drink just to drink and get drunk where it becomes questionable.
right. And
Maybe if it's in the hands of people like we said aren't fully developed and they're maybe hormonal and they're going through all of these because I feel like also too that's a time where people are figuring themselves out and they also hate themselves the most.
right.
If
And
you
like if
put a
you throw
bottle of
alcohol with
alcohol
like
in their hand, that's not a good cocktail, pun
yeah.
intended.
Like my older sister came home from Delaware like her first year and there was like a couple students who were freshmen who committed suicide. And my
Yeah.
sister's convinced it's because they went away to college with mental health issues and then they were introduced to drinking, which is a depression, and it just amplified their mental health issues and didn't solve anything and it resulted in that. I feel like mental health in our country isn't addressed enough and it's like when I got sick it took a huge toll on my mental health and like thank
Well,
god I have the support system that I do because like it helped me work through and be like wait I don't want to be here and work like I don't know what would have happened if I stayed at Scranton. Like I love Scranton, it's a beautiful town, it's a beautiful city, it's a beautiful school, but like I needed to be home for my
but that's also all materialistic things.
right.
It's a nice town, it's a nice school. Yeah, that's what it is, but like that's not the stuff that necessarily really matters.
No,
Um so like when you were
that is
going through all of that stuff and even coming out of that of um treatment and stuff, what you said like your family and your support system, what do you did you get is that when you started getting into fitness? Like did that really help you in your mental state?
actually so funny enough. Um, when I came home, I stopped working out. So like my only coping mechanism when I was away was the gym. And so coming home, I had my family and they were other coping mechanisms for me. And I mainly relied on being home. So I stopped working out as much. And it wasn't until I started going to therapy again because coming that whole yes, coming home was the greatest decision for me, but, like, just the decision itself also, like, made me really depressed because I felt like I failed in some degree. So, it was like, I'm struggling up at Scranton, but I need to come home. I come home, I'm doing better, but I feel like I failed, so I went back into a depression. It wasn't until I kinda, started going to therapy again that I did reintroduce fitness, and
Mhm.
that made a major impact in the rest of my recovery process. So yes, it had a huge impact, but I think there was a time where I needed to take a break of it to
Yeah.
figure out the other parts.
You had to
And
take a break to figure out who you were.
yeah,
Because
because
essentially
it's
that took over your entire life.
yeah, it's
And
all I was doing at Scranton. Like
yeah.
I would go to the gym before classes in between classes sometimes and after classes. Like I would figure out a way to either go to the gym or be running. Like
So you were mad skinny.
I really was. I look at pictures from when I was I weighed like 122 pounds and like there was no butt.
What a shame. I have that problem. Not the 122 pounds, but the no butt thing.